I'm Sari.
And I'm Haley.
And this is Seamwork Radio. Welcome back to Seamwork Radio, where we share practical ideas for building a creative process so you can sew with intention and joy. Today, we're talking about something that's really close to my heart, which is how to keep stress out of your sewing room. So we're going to cover 5 practical strategies that can transform your sewing from a source of frustration into the peaceful, creative sanctuary it's meant to be, plus some bonus tips that'll help you stay energized and motivated for all your future projects. All right. Our icebreaker for today, Haley, what kind of projects really get you in the zone where you completely lose track of time?
There's 2 types of projects that come to mind. One is making a pretty dress because I just love making pretty dresses. It's my favorite thing to sew.
Yeah.
So I get really in the zone when I'm making those. And the other thing is things that are very repetitive. So if I'm making a quilt or I'm lots of times more home dec or craft or craftsy kind of things can be more like that. And I can get kind of in the zone where you're just doing the same thing over and over again. And you get kind of hooked on it.
Yeah.
So I think those are my 2. What about you?
I think definitely for me, repetitive things for sure. I was going to say quilting as well. I definitely lose track of time when I'm quilting. This is very soothing. It's it's repetitive, but it's not so tedious that you feel bored with it.
Yeah.
I can see why people get really, really into quilting. I'm kind of a quilt dabbler. I've made a few quilts, but I'm not great at quilting yet. But I definitely see the appeal of it. I love to make a quilt and just get lost in it.
Yeah, I think for me, I like the piecing part. I don't like the quilting part.
The quilting part's hard. It's difficult with a regular machine.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. So I'm always really into it when the whole time I'm making the quilt top. And then when it comes to pin basting and then quilting it, I'm so over this.
Yeah, that part's hard. But I do like piecing things together. And I like designing quilts too, figuring out the colors and all that. That's really fun. I think anytime when I'm doing that kind of design and picking out fabrics, putting colors together, that's when I kind of get in the zone. That's my happy place when it comes to sewing. And whether it's a garment project or a home dec project or a quilting project, that's what I really love to do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a good question. And if you have an icebreaker question for us for a future episode, you can leave it in a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and we'll answer it in a future episode. Or you can leave it in a comment on Spotify, and we'll look at it there too. All right, so let's get into our topic for today, minimizing stress, because I think we've all been there. We're really excited about a project, and then you sit down to sew, and then somehow everything goes wrong. Maybe you're rushing to finish something, or you're tired and you're just making silly mistakes, or you just feel this mounting pressure that turns what should be a joyful creative time into something that feels really overwhelming. And I used to think that stress was just part of the sewing process, but over the years, I've realized that some challenges are inevitable when you're creating something, but the overall experience doesn't have to be stressful. In fact, one thing I recently read is that stress comes from having more perceived problems than resources to solve them. And that really resonated with me because I think in sewing, we often make our problems seem bigger than they really are, and we forget about all the resources we actually have to solve them. And I think the thing is that when sewing becomes stressful, it stops being the creative outlet that we really need it to be. So instead of energizing us, it drains us. And instead of being kind of a way to offload stress from the rest of our life, it just becomes another source of stress, that's not good. So today we want to share some strategies that have really helped us create a more peaceful sewing practice. Haley, what does stress-free sewing look like for you?
I think stress-free sewing looks like me being in a clean, quiet room. And I'm hydrated and fed and well rested. And
Are you alone in this room?
I'm definitely 100% alone. The door's locked. And there's no cat, no children,
Yes.
no husband.
Important to keep that cat out.
Yeah, really mostly the cat.
I know, the cat
she's
is
the main problem.
I know.
And I'm working on something that has been well thought out.
Mm-hmm.
No surprises. Few surprises. That's what stress-free sewing looks like for me. What about you?
Yeah, that all sounds great. No cats or dogs is really important. That's why I'm so glad that my sewing space is in the shed
Yeah.
in the backyard because there's no animal. They come and visit me. The dogs come and visit me once in a while, but they don't stay for very long. I think that's really important. I think for me, just being able to kind of recover from mistakes is really important. And for me, that just feels like having the mental energy to deal with stuff like that when it does come up, because it's always going to come up.
That's why the well-rested and fed part is important.
Yeah. I think that mental energy is a big part of it.
Yeah. When do you feel most stressed while sewing? And conversely, like, when do you feel most at peace with your projects?
I think I feel most stressed when my machine or anything, I always get really stressed out by technological problems. So whether that is my machine or my tools or something just not working as it's intended, that's when I get really, really stressed out, especially if I don't know what's wrong with it. I find that quite stressful. I think I feel most at peace when I'm not on a timeline and I'm not rushing. I think that's really important for me. What about you?
I was going to say most stressed is when I'm on a timeline.
Yeah.
When I feel rushed when I'm sewing, I'm not having a good time. I'm making more mistakes. I'm having to compromise. And yeah, that's my most stressed, probably followed short by technical problems.
It's so frustrating.
Oh my gosh.
My machine is in the shop right now, and it's it wasn't a good time.
I really need to get mine in for a tune-up. When I feel most at peace with my projects, when everything is behaving nicely.
Yeah.
The fabric machine.
Everybody listening to me.
Everyone's listening to me. And, most of the time that happens because I've thought through, all of the elements of the project. Surprises happen. Machines do be doing weird things sometimes. So some things are unpreventable. But I think when I've really taken the time to read the instructions from start to finish and test my fabric and do all the things so that I'm minimizing those surprises.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really important.
How do you know when you need to take a break from a project?
When I try to pay attention to how my body is responding.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously there's the signs if you're hungry, if you're tired, those kinds of things. But also if I feel like my fuse is getting really short and I'm less tolerant of any little issues that come up, if I find myself cursing or gritting my teeth or just getting a little bit angry, then I think that's a good time to take a break and just walk away for a little while.
There's steam rising from my head.
Yeah.
I would say yes to all of that. My other rule that I've given myself over the years is if I make 2 mistakes in a row.
That's a good one.
Then that usually shows a level of I don't know, I'm have lost the thoughtfulness.
Yeah.
I'm making silly mistakes that it's time to put it down for a little bit.
Yeah, that's a really good one because one mistake that can happen when you are noticing a pattern of mistakes, then maybe it's time to take a break.
Totally. And then it's removes the fault from me. I'm it's not me. It's that I'm too tired.
Yeah.
That I'm not in the right headspace. It's not personal when I'm making those mistakes. So what do you think is the difference between a good challenge and an overwhelming level of stress?
Well, I think it's kind of like working out. You want a little bit of a challenge if you want to improve.
Mhm.
So you kind of need to push yourself a little bit. And so I think that little bit of stress is a good thing. A little bit of friction there
Yeah,
is
you
a good
need the
thing.
progressive overload.
Yeah, exactly. But when it becomes unpleasant to the point where you're not enjoying yourself anymore, I think that's when it's too much. You kind of have
Yeah.
to find that zone, that in between space where you're pushing yourself hard enough, but not so much that you're going to failure on every single thing you're doing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I agree. I tend to choose a challenge per project. So, like, if I'm working with a really challenging fabric, I'm
Mhm.
not going to choose something that has incredibly challenging details.
Yeah.
Or if I'm like sewing something that requires a new skill of me, then I'll try to make sure that there's not like too many new skills being asked of me.
Yeah.
And that's what I would always recommend to students as well, is just like pick a skill at a time.
Yeah.
Like you don't need to learn 10 new skills today.
Yeah, because then you can focus
Yeah.
and really use your energy towards that one thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great piece of advice for anyone, no matter what your skill level is right now. Just to enjoy things a little bit more. All right, well, let's get into our tips. Haley's already shared one really good tip, but we've got a lot more to share with you. And the first one, for me, this is really important because this is something I used to do a lot when I was a beginner, which is setting arbitrary deadlines. Because I used to be really terrible about this. I'd decide, like I needed a new dress for an event that was 2 weeks away, and then I'd stress myself out trying to finish it. And I think the truth is most of our sewing projects don't actually have real deadlines. So if you can give yourself permission to work at a more comfortable pace, you just enjoy the process so much more. And if you do have a real deadline, like a gift or a special occasion, just build in lots of extra time so it doesn't feel like a rush towards the finish line. I don't know. For some reason, I don't know why we do this to ourselves as sewers, but I feel like this is so common. I've heard from so many other people too, of just like setting a deadline for something, even if you don't need to have a deadline for it, and then beating yourself up as you get closer to it. I don't know why that is.
Yeah, I don't do it for things that don't need a deadline. Like if I'm just want to make a jean jacket because I want a jean jacket, I won't
Mhm.
give myself a deadline on it. I will, however, sew something new for every single trip I go on and every single event I attend, and no one can stop me from doing that.
Yeah. Well, that's fun though. It's
is
fun to have
fun.
a goal like that.
Yeah, totally. I don't know. It's just, sometimes it bites me
Mm-hmm.
in the butt and I don't care. I won't stop. I love it so much. It's so fun to have to look forward to like it's like a little fashion show in your head just for yourself. Well, our next tip is also related to time management, and that is to double your time estimates for whatever project you're working on. This goes for home improvement projects and for sewing projects.
Yeah.
And like I said, it goes really hand in hand with not setting arbitrary deadlines for yourself. I think that we're all terrible at estimating how long a sewing project will take. Just last week, Aretta was asking me, how long will that take you to sew?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, 2.5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me 4. So almost double.
So it's a good rule of thumb.
It is a good rule of thumb. And I've learned to take you think I would learn to take my initial time estimate and literally double it. This accounts for all of the little things like the pressing and the rethinking the construction and taking little breaks.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, seam ripping. It also gives you space to enjoy the process instead of feeling like you need to really rush through it.
Mm-hmm.
When you're constantly behind schedule, sewing feels less relaxing, and that's not what we want.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like this is something I can learn with every single project in my life, whether it's sewing or anything else.
Yes.
It always takes twice as long as you think. The next tip is something we've touched on already, which is don't power through when you're hungry or tired. I've definitely been guilty of that. And this is a really simple one, but it does make a really huge difference. When I'm hungry or when I'm tired, that's when I make the mistakes that really frustrate me. And I've learned to recognize those signs and just step away. So sometimes I'll grab a snack and come back, and sometimes I'll just call it a day. Your sewing's going to be there tomorrow, and you can approach it with fresh energy and feel a lot better. And it's like that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. You gotta keep yourself energized and feeling good if you want sewing to feel good.
Yeah, definitely. Ooh, the next one is to sew in smaller chunks and not marathon sessions. So I used to be really guilty of this. I used to think that I needed really big blocks of time to make any progress on projects. I almost exclusively sewed in like 8 hour, like all day chunks. That was just my preferred way of sewing. And over time, as my life became more busy, I found that I was making less and less time to sew because I simply did not have 8 hours at a time to just stop everything and sew. So since then, I found that shorter, more focused sessions actually work a lot better for me. So maybe it's 45 minutes or an hour, and sometimes, to be real, it is literally just 15 minutes. You stay more focused, you make fewer mistakes, and you end each session feeling just like accomplished instead of totally drained. Plus, it's easier to fit sewing into your life when you're not trying to look for these like full day or half day blocks of time. Sari, do you prefer like shorter sessions or longer sewing sessions?
I prefer shorter ones. I try to sew on most weekdays. I try to sew for about an hour at the end of my day, like between the end of work and when I need to make dinner if we don't have leftovers. So that is my kind of preferred window. Is about 1 to 2 hours. I think is ideal for me. But I can do 30 minutes if I only have 30 minutes. And I can do more time if I do happen to have more time. But I think over a certain amount, like after like 3 hours, I maybe do 4, but like 3 hours, I'm just kind of like, I'm a little tired.
Yeah.
Like a little mentally drained. So I feel like shorter windows work better for me. The next one is one of my favorite strategies, which is to create relaxing sewing rituals. So for me personally, I always start my sewing time by making a cup of tea and putting on some music or a podcast. I have a little record player in my sewing shed, and I love to just put on a record and relax. It just feels a lot better to start that way. And I also spend 5 minutes just kind of tidying my space and getting everything organized. I try to do this either before I start sewing or after I'm done, preferably after I'm done, just so I can come into a fresh space. But I think it is really important to me to have everything a little bit organized. And then sometimes I'll even light a candle or, put on an essential oil diffuser or something to make it smell nice in there, and just create a little bit of ambiance. Try to be careful about this, though. I don't do it very often just because I'm in a shed in the woods and I don't want to accidentally burn the place down.
A shed full of fabric.
Yeah, a shed full of fabric.
Of kindling.
in the woods. There's literally like chopped wood next to my shed. And I think these little rituals just kind of signal to my brain that this is, just my peaceful, creative time. And it helps me to transition from whatever stress I might be carrying from the day, whatever's going on in life, whatever is on my to-do list, and just kind of put that aside and enjoy being creative for a little while. What kind of rituals help you get into that creative mindset, Haley?
I think when I do my ultra small burst, I don't do any kind of ritual. But if I'm setting myself up for an hour or two of sewing, I always take a few minutes to reset my space and just make sure that it's like free of any visual clutter. And I also do some kind of entertainment, a podcast, music. If I'm doing something that's like more monotonous, I might put on like an episode of like Drag Race or something like that, just for some light entertainment. But yeah, those are kind of my steps. I have like a little, I guess, kind of like an altar space in my sewing room where I keep like some sentimental pictures and some other like sentimental items. And I have a little candle there that sometimes I will light.
Oh, that's nice. All right. Well, I have a few more bonus tips before we wrap up for today. I just have 4 bonus tips that I wanted to put in here for you guys because they can also be really helpful. One of them is building an inspiration library of physical books. Because sometimes when you don't feel like sewing, just browsing some beautiful books can reignite your creativity. So I think it's a really nice thing to have around you. Or maybe like magazines. But I think having something physical is really, really nice in your sewing area. The next tip is don't sew if you don't feel like it. So I know it sounds counterintuitive, but just forcing yourself conditions your brain to see sewing as a chore. So if you don't feel like doing it, it's not a requirement. So don't do it. Treat yourself kindly when you make mistakes. This is really big. So if you do make an error, don't beat yourself up over it. Just talk to yourself the way you'd talk to a good friend. I think this is really key because I think the most stressful times when you're sewing, at least for me, are when mistakes are happening. So if you have made a mistake and you feel like you should have known better or that it was, a stupid thing to do or whatever, put all that aside and remember to just be kind to yourself no matter what mistakes you've made. And then finally, remember that you have more resources than you think. Remember what I'd read about stress, that it's the feeling that you have more problems than you have resources to solve them. So if you can remember all the resources that you have between online tutorials, your sewing community, your growing skills, you can solve most problems. Almost anything is solvable. You just have to know how to get there, and there's lots of ways to do that. So those are our tips for eliminating stress from your sewing practice. So I'm going to recap the 5 key strategies we talked about, which are don't set arbitrary deadlines, double your time estimates, don't power through when you're hungry or tired, sew in smaller chunks, and create relaxing sewing rituals. Well, my big takeaway from all of this is that sewing is supposed to be something that makes it easier on ourselves, and we don't have to make things harder than they need to be. I feel like when we create the right conditions for ourselves, so enough time and the right energy, really peaceful environment, sewing really becomes more of this really wonderful restorative practice and not just another to-do item or another thing that you feel like that just kind of adds to your burdens in life. I don't think that's really something that you don't have to feel that way. You can make it into something that restores you instead. What about you, Haley? What's your big takeaway?
I'm very inspired by the quote you shared about the stress being, more perceived problems than you have resources. And I think a lot of the times what I experience and what I hear from a lot of people is that they don't feel like they have enough time to dedicate to sewing, and time is a resource.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be really stressful when things are not going according to plan, things are taking longer than you think they're going to take, and all of a sudden this like precious resource of your time feels like it's being like sucked away from you. And I think that you can for myself that I can tackle this from like 2 angles. I can remove the like perceived deadlines as much as I possibly can so that it doesn't feel like I'm having to work against the clock. And then also I can do more things that allow me a little bit of extra time and space to be able to invest in my sewing. For me, like recently, I've been sewing a little bit after work on nights that we're like maybe it's like a crock pot dinner that is already like prepared, or we're having like the soup that I prepared on Sunday night. It only buys me like 15 to 20 minutes of sewing time, but that's like an hour cumulative across the week that I wouldn't have had otherwise. So, um, it's this like two-pronged approach of creating space for ourselves, creating the perception of time, and then also creating actual time. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I think there is a big difference between the perception that you have enough time and the actual reality of the amount of time you have.
Right. I mean, we can work on both.
Yeah. And that's something I've been thinking about a lot is the idea of rushing and how there's like the physical act of rushing because you don't have enough time and you feel like you're running around doing things. And then there's like the mental posture of rushing. And I feel like you can move quickly through life and get a lot of things done without necessarily taking on the mental posture of rushing. You can stay calm even while you're managing a lot of different things. It does take a little bit of intention to do that and kind of checking yourself in order to find that calm within you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was a great episode. Thank you for that discussion, Haley. And speaking of making sewing easier and more enjoyable, one of the best ways to reduce stress is to have a clear plan for what you want to create. And when you know what you're working towards, you can make more intentional decisions about your time and your projects. So if you want to start planning your own wardrobe, we've created a free wardrobe planning kit that has all the tools you need to get started. And it includes our beloved sewing planner, a huge library of pattern flats, and more resources to help you think through your creative decisions. So head over to seamwork.com and you can download it for free, and we'll put a link to it in the show notes as well. And if you liked this episode, we would love it if you could leave us a review. You can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify or wherever you're listening right now. You can also follow us on YouTube at Seamwork Video. You can follow us on Instagram at Seamwork. And if you'd like to become part of the Seamwork community, head over to seamwork.com to learn how to join. And that's it for us this week. I'm Sari.
And I'm Haley.
And this is Seamwork Radio.